No one in the family wanted the hay house until the grandson walked in and found Marcus Thompson stood there before the notary, listening to the reading of Grandpa William's will with a heavy heart. The whole family had gathered in the office in Charlotte to discover how the inheritance would be divided, but no one expected that unpleasant surprise. It was when the rural property was mentioned that the atmosphere changed completely. The old hay house in the Carolina countryside, built decades ago by the grandfather himself, was being offered to any family member who wanted to keep it. "I don't want that old thing," said Aunt Patricia, shaking her head with disdain. "What a hassle it will be to keep that thing standing." Roberto's father, David Thompson, sighed heavily and looked at his brother. "William, do you want to keep it? I already have too many problems to solve." "No way," replied Uncle William, the deceased's youngest son. "That place always gave me the creeps. Grandpa spent hours there alone talking to himself. It's not normal." Marcus watched the discussion in silence. At 22, he had been the only grandson who really spent time with Grandpa William in recent years. While all the other relatives only showed up at the end-of-year parties, he visited the elderly man every weekend at his house in the city. "Does no one really want it?" asked the notary, adjusting his glasses. "No one," confirmed David, speaking for the whole family. "I want it," said Marcus, suddenly surprising everyone. The silence that followed was awkward. All heads turned to him, with expressions ranging from surprise to disapproval. "Marcus, my son, you don't know what you're saying," said his mother, Catherine. "That house is falling apart. It will cost a fortune to renovate." "And what do you want it for?" questioned Aunt Patricia. "You don't even have your own money yet." Marcus felt his face grow warm. It was true that he was still finishing his engineering degree and depended financially on his parents, but something inside him couldn't accept that the family would simply abandon the place where his grandfather spent so much time. "I will take responsibility for the property," he said firmly. "If later I can't maintain it, you can decide to sell it." David looked at his son with an expression that mixed irritation and concern. "You're being too sentimental, boy. Your grandfather is gone. There's no use getting attached to a pile of old wood." "That's exactly it," agreed Aunt Patricia. "William was always a bit strange anyway. He spent more time in that house than with his own family." Marcus felt a pang in his chest, hearing his relatives talk about his grandfather that way. William Thompson had been a kind and caring man who always had time to talk with his grandson about any subject. He told stories from his youth, taught woodworking tricks, and always showed genuine interest in Marcus's studies. "It's decided then," said the notary, making some notes. "The rural property goes to Marcus Thompson." The rest of the meeting proceeded in a tense atmosphere. The division of the other assets was done quickly, and each received their share of the inheritance without further discussion. Marcus noticed that everyone avoided looking in his direction, as if he had committed some terrible mistake. In the parking lot after leaving the office, David pulled his son aside for a private talk. "Listen here, Marcus. I understand you were fond of your grandfather, but you need to think with your head. That property will be a loss. The house has been abandoned for years, and you don't even know if the structure is still safe." "Dad, I just want to take a look at the place before making any final decision," replied Marcus. "Can you at least support me in this?" "Me?" David sighed and shook his head. "Your grandfather was always stubborn too. It seems that trait passed down to you. That's fine, but I won't help you financially if you get into trouble because of it." 3 days later, Marcus was riding his motorcycle down the dirt road leading to the property. It was a clear Saturday morning, and the golden sun lit up the grassy fields around him. The Carolina countryside landscape always calmed him, but today he felt a mix of anxiety and curiosity. The hay house appeared after a bend, exactly as he remembered from the few times he had been there in childhood. The wood and straw structure seemed smaller than in his memories, but it still had that rustic, welcoming appearance that had fascinated him as a child. Marcus parked the motorcycle and walked toward the entrance. The wooden door was slightly ajar, creaking softly in the wind. He pushed it slowly and entered the dim interior. The light filtering through the gaps in the straw created a somewhat mystical atmosphere, full of golden dust dancing in the air. The smell was of old wood and damp earth, mixed with something he couldn't identify. Perhaps it was the dried herbs his grandpa used to keep in jars around the house. Dear listener, if you're enjoying the story, please take a moment to like and especially subscribe to the channel. It helps us a lot as we're just starting out. Now, continuing. Marcus took a few cautious steps across the plank floor, testing if the structure was safe. Some boards groaned under his weight but seemed sturdy enough. There were some pieces of furniture covered in dusty sheets, an old table, 2 chairs, and what looked like a bookshelf. He was heading toward the bookshelf when he tripped on a board that was slightly raised. Kneeling to check what had happened, he noticed the wood wasn't just loose. It seemed to have been purposely cut to create a sort of trapdoor. Carefully, Marcus lifted the planks and discovered a compartment dug into the ground. Inside, protected by a metal box, were dozens of letters yellowed with time. His fingers trembled as he picked up the first envelope and read the name written in careful script. My dearest Eleanor. Eleanor was the name of the grandmother he had never met. He always knew she had passed away when his father was still a child, but no one ever spoke much about her. David always changed the subject when Marcus asked about his grandmother, and Grandpa William himself rarely mentioned his wife. Marcus carefully opened the first letter, feeling he was intruding on a very private space. His grandpa's handwriting, which he recognized immediately, spoke of the longing and emptiness left by Eleanor's departure. My dearest Eleanor, today marks 6 months since you left. I built this house in the place where we used to come courting when we were young. Remember that midsummer festival where we danced for the first time? It was right here on this piece of land. I hoped that if you ever wanted to return one day, you would remember this special place for both of us. Marcus's hands shook as he read. Those words carried a deep pain and a love he had never imagined his grandpa felt. The image of the calm, reserved man he knew took on a completely new dimension. He continued reading other letters, each revealing more details about his grandpa's silent suffering. William wrote to Eleanor as if she could hear him, telling her about the children growing up, about changes in the city, about how he missed her smile and her company. Eleanor, my love, today David turned 8. He asked where you are, and I didn't know how to answer. How do you explain to a child that sometimes the people we love have to leave? He has your eyes, you know. The same brown eyes and the same curious expression when he's thinking about something. Marcus felt his eyes fill with tears. He had never thought about how difficult it must have been for his grandfather to raise the children alone, holding on to hope that his wife would return someday, and all those letters were never sent. Why? He continued exploring the secret compartment and found other objects, an engagement ring he had never seen his grandmother wear, dried flowers kept in small preserving jars, and at the bottom of the box, a diary with a worn leather cover. The diary was closed with an elastic band that fell apart at the touch. Marcus opened it to the first page and saw a date from over 40 years ago. It was his grandfather's personal record, written in the first days after his grandmother's departure. March 15th, 1983. Eleanor left yesterday after the most terrible fight of our lives. I said things I shouldn't have said. She said things I never imagined she felt. Perhaps it's for the best. Perhaps we are too different to live together, but why does my heart hurt so much? Marcus sat on the dusty floor, completely absorbed in the reading. The version of the story he had always heard was that his grandmother had left due to health problems, seeking treatment in another city and eventually passing away there. But those words suggested something completely different. He continued reading the diary entries, following his grandfather's thoughts during that difficult period. William alternated between moments of anger and longing, between the hope that Eleanor would return and the resignation that perhaps it was better to forget. March 20th, 1983. Today I told the children that their mother had to travel to take care of her health. I saw in David's eyes that he didn't completely believe it, but Patricia accepted the explanation without question. How will I maintain this lie for so long? How will I explain if she never returns? April 2nd, 1983. I started building the house at the place where we met. I work on the wood during the day and come here at night to continue. It's the only time I feel at peace. If Eleanor ever wants to find me, she'll know where to look. Marcus understood he was discovering a story completely different from the one he knew. His grandfather hadn't just lost his wife to an illness. They had fought, and she had left voluntarily. But why had the family never known the truth? He flipped through more pages of the diary, trying to better understand what had happened. The entries became less frequent as the months passed, but the pain remained present in the words. September 15th, 1983. Today marks 6 months. I finished the house. It's small, but has everything we need. I brought some of her things that were left here. The dress she wore at our wedding, the perfume she liked, those poetry books she used to read to me. If she returns, I want her to feel at home. November 3rd, 1983. David asked me when his mother is coming back. I said I don't know. It's the first time I've been honest with him about it. I saw that he understood she might never return. My 8-year-old son already carries a pain that should have been mine alone. Marcus closed the diary for a few moments, feeling the weight of that discovery. His father had grown up without a mother, believing a version of the story that protected both his mother's image and his children's feelings. His grandfather had carried the burden of the truth alone for decades. He opened the diary again to a more recent entry from just a few years ago. June 12th, 2019. Today marks 40 years since Eleanor left. Marcus came to visit me and asked about her. I almost told him the truth. He's old enough to understand. But how do I explain that I kept a lie for so long? How do I admit that perhaps I was a coward for not going after her? Marcus felt a tightness in his chest. His grandfather had thought about telling him the truth, but hadn't found the courage. How many other things had William kept to himself all these years? He continued reading the more recent entries, discovering that his grandpa visited the Hay House regularly until shortly before passing away. He came here to be close to the memories of Eleanor, to feel connected to her in some way. January 8th, 2023. My health is worsening, but I can still come here once a week. Today I brought a new letter for Eleanor. I know she will never read it, but writing makes me feel better. It's as if she's still listening somewhere. The last diary entry was from just 2 months before his grandpa's death. March 20th, 2024. Exactly 41 years. If Eleanor is still alive, she must be 82 now. Does she still think of me sometimes? Did she ever regret leaving? I regret not going after her. Regret. My pride was greater than my love, and now it's too late to fix that. Marcus closed the diary carefully and looked around the house with completely new eyes. Every detail there had a meaning. The table where his grandpa wrote the letters, the chair where he sat to read, the simple bed where perhaps he dreamed of Eleanor's return. He stood up and walked through the house, observing everything attentively. There was a small cabinet in the corner, and inside he found more treasures. Old photos of his grandpa and grandma together, clothes of hers that were never donated, personal items that told the story of a marriage that seemed to have been very happy before everything fell apart. One photo particularly caught his attention. It was from his grandparents' wedding in 1960. Eleanor wore a simple yet elegant dress, and the smile on her face radiated genuine happiness. William was beside her, looking at her with an expression of pure love. They seemed like the perfect couple. What could have happened to destroy something so beautiful? Marcus carefully placed all the letters and the diary back in the metal box, deciding to take everything home. He needed to process that information and decide what to do with it. Would it be right to tell the family about the discovery, or should he respect his grandpa's wish to keep the secret? On the way back to the city, his mind buzzed with questions. Why had Eleanor left? Where was she now? Could she still be alive? And why did his grandpa never try to find her? Arriving home, Marcus went straight up to his room and locked the door. He organized all the letters by date and began reading them one by one, trying to better understand his grandparents' story. The letters revealed touching details about the couple's daily life before the separation. William talked about the plans they had for the future, the desire to have more children, the dreams of building a prosperous life together. Eleanor appeared in the memories as an intelligent, caring, and determined woman. "My dearest Eleanor, remember when you said you wanted to have at least 5 children? I laughed and said 2 was already fine, but deep down I loved your grand dreams. You always thought big, always believed we could conquer the world together. Today I passed by the store where you bought that blue dress I liked so much. The saleswoman greeted me and asked about you. I didn't know what to say. How do I explain that the most important woman in my life simply disappeared? Marcus realized the letters weren't just the venting of a lonely man. They were genuine attempts to keep the connection with Eleanor alive, as if his grandpa believed that somehow she could feel the love he still had for her. During the following days, Marcus couldn't focus on anything else. At college, during classes, his mind wandered to his grandpa's letters. At home, he avoided talking with his parents about any subject, fearing they would notice something had changed. David noticed the change in his son's behavior during Wednesday's dinner. "Marcus, are you okay? You've seemed a bit spacey these days." "I'm fine, Dad. Just worried about my studies." "It doesn't have to do with that old house, does it?" asked Catherine, his mother. "I knew that would affect you somehow." Marcus nearly choked on his food. His mother's intuition was sharper than he had imagined. "What old house?" he asked, pretending not to understand. "Grandpa William's house, of course. You went there last weekend, didn't you?" Marcus hesitated. Technically, he wasn't lying by not telling about the discovery, but he felt uncomfortable hiding something so important from his parents. "Yes, I did, just to check on the structure." "And? Will you be able to fix that thing up?" asked David with skepticism. "I'm still evaluating it." That night, Marcus decided to do deeper research about his grandmother Eleanor. Maybe he could find some information about where she had lived after leaving the family. If she were still alive, perhaps it would be possible to find her. He began searching online records, social networks, and phone directories. The name Eleanor Thompson was very common, but he had some specific information that could help. The date of birth, the maiden name he found on some old documents in the house, and the towns where she had relatives. After a few hours of research, Marcus found an interesting lead. There was an Eleanor Marie Harrison Thompson, around the same age as his grandmother, who had lived in Raleigh between 1985 and 2010. The records indicated she had worked as an elementary school teacher and had never remarried. Marcus's heart raced. Could it be her? Grandpa's Eleanor. He kept investigating and discovered that this Eleanor had moved to Asheville in 2010, where she worked at a local school until retiring. There were records of her up to 2022, which meant she could still be alive. Marcus stayed up all night, debating with himself whether or not he should try to make contact. If she really was his grandmother, how would she react to knowing the family had found her after decades? And how would the family react to discovering he had done this search? The next morning, Marcus made a decision. Before making any move, he needed to talk to someone in the family. It wouldn't be fair to make this decision alone. He chose to talk first with his uncle William, his father's younger brother. At 52, William Jr. had been just a baby when his mother left, so perhaps he had a different perspective on the situation. Marcus called his uncle, and they arranged to meet at a coffee shop downtown. When he got there, William was already waiting, with his always well-groomed appearance and a curious smile on his face. "So, nephew, what's so important it couldn't be said over the phone?" Marcus took a deep breath and decided to tell him everything. He talked about the discovery in the hayloft, about the letters, about the diary, and about his search to find his grandmother. William listened in silence, with an expression that shifted from curiosity to surprise, and then to something that looked like pain. When Marcus finished telling the story, his uncle was silent for a few moments, absently stirring his coffee, which had gone cold. "I always suspected there was something strange about our mother's story," he finally said. "When I was a teenager, I tried to ask Dad some questions, but he always changed the subject. Once I found a photo of her hidden in his wallet, and when I asked about it, he got very nervous. You never tried to investigate on your own?" "I tried a few times, but my brother always discouraged me. David said it was better to let the past rest, that stirring this up would only cause everyone pain." Marcus realized his father's resistance wasn't just practical, but emotional. David had built a wall around the memories of his mother to protect himself from the pain. "Uncle, do you think I should tell Dad about what I found?" William sighed deeply. "Marcus, that's a very difficult decision. On one hand, you have the right to know the truth about the family. On the other hand, Stirring this up could bring consequences we can't foresee. But Eleanor might be alive. If she is, wouldn't it be fair to give her the chance to meet the grandchildren and great-grandchildren she's never seen? And what if she doesn't want to meet them? What if she built a new life and doesn't want to be disturbed by ghosts from the past? Marcus hadn't considered that possibility. In his mind, he imagined an emotional reunion with tears of joy and a happy family gathering. But reality could be very different. "Uncle, I need advice. What would you do in my place?" William looked out the cafe window, watching the street activity as he thought. "You know, Marcus, I've lived my whole life with a hole where the memory of my mother should be. Sometimes I wonder what it would have been like if she had stayed, if our lives would be different. Maybe it's time to finally seek those answers." "So, you think I should try to find her?" "I think you should talk to your father first. If we're going to stir this up, we have to do it together as a family. David deserves to know what you've discovered before we take any action." Marcus knew his uncle was right, but he feared his father's reaction. David had always been a practical and controlled man who avoided emotionally complex situations. How would he react upon discovering that the version of the story he knew was a lie? Dear listener, if you're enjoying the story, please take a moment to like and especially subscribe to the channel. It really helps us who are just starting out. Now, continuing. That night, Marcus prepared for the most difficult conversation of his life. He organized all the letters, the diary, and the information he had found about Eleanor. When his parents were watching television in the living room, he asked to speak with them. "Mom, Dad, I need to tell you something very important that I discovered at Grandpa's house." David turned off the television and turned to his son attentively. Catherine also stopped knitting and looked at Marcus with concern. "What is it, son?" she asked. Marcus began to tell the story from the beginning, showing the letters and reading excerpts from the diary. He saw his father's expression gradually change from curiosity to disbelief, and then to something that seemed like shock. When he finished explaining everything, the silence in the room was almost suffocating. David was pale, his hands trembling slightly. Catherine had brought her hand to her mouth, her eyes wide. This can't be right," murmured David. "My father told me my mother had health problems. He never mentioned any fight." "Dad, it's all written here. Grandpa kept up that version to protect you, but the truth is that Grandma left of her own will after an argument." David stood up abruptly and began to pace the room. 40 years, Marcus. 40 years believing a lie. And you're telling me my father carried this guilt alone all that time? It seems so, and from what I understood from the letters, he never tried to find her because he was afraid of rejection. Catherine approached her husband and took his hand. "David, dear, take a deep breath. I know it's a shock, but how could he do this to me?" interrupted David, his voice choked. "I spent my entire childhood waiting for my mother to return from medical treatment. How many nights did I go to sleep thinking that maybe she would appear at the door the next day?" Marcus felt his heart tighten seeing his father's pain. Maybe Uncle William was right about the unpredictable consequences of stirring up the past. "Dad, I didn't mean to cause you suffering. I just thought you had the right to know the truth." David stopped walking and looked at his son. "You did the right thing, Marcus. The truth is always better than a lie, even when it hurts." Catherine picked up one of the letters and read it silently, tears in her eyes. "David, look at the love your father felt for her. These letters are beautiful. He truly believed she could come back someday." "And did you find out where she might be now?" asked David to Marcus. "I found a lead. There's a woman with Grandma's name and age living in Asheville. It could be her." "How far is Asheville from here?" "About a 2-hour drive." David was silent for a few moments, processing all the information. Finally, he looked at his wife and then at his son. "We're going to find her," he said with determination. "If my mother is alive, she needs to know that we forgive her and that we want to meet her." "Are you sure, David?" asked Catherine. "It could be very painful for everyone. Catherine, I've lived 40 years without my mother. If there's a chance, however small, to recover that lost time, I'm going to try." Marcus felt a mix of relief and anxiety. His father had reacted better than he expected, but now they were committing to a path of no return. "Dad, what if it's not her? Or if it is her, but she doesn't want to meet us? Then at least we'll know we tried, and we'll be able to tell her about the love my father felt, even after all these years." The next morning, Marcus called Uncle William and told him about the conversation with his parents. His uncle was surprised by David's decision, but agreed to accompany them on the trip to Asheville. "If we're going to do this, we're going to do it right," said William. "I'll call Patricia too. She has the right to participate." Aunt Patricia reacted differently from her brothers. When she learned of the discovery, she became irritated and accused Marcus of causing unnecessary trouble in the family. "This whole story is nonsense," she said over the phone. "If that woman wanted to come back, she would have done so a long time ago. Why stir this up now?" But after a few hours, she called back and said she had changed her mind. "I also want to meet my mother," she admitted. Her voice choked. "Even if it's too late for many things." The following Saturday, the four of them met at Marcus's house to travel together to Asheville. David had obtained the exact address through a friend who worked at a records office, and now they had a specific location to investigate. The trip was made in silence, each lost in their own thoughts and anxieties. Marcus drove, observing the Carolina countryside landscape and trying to imagine how the meeting would be. When they arrived in Asheville, they looked for the address in a quiet residential neighborhood. The house was simple but well kept, with a small garden and a porch where a rocking chair could be seen. "This is it," said Marcus, parking the car in front of the gate. They spent a few moments observing the house in silence. There were clothes hanging on the line and a bicycle in the yard, signs that someone lived there. "Now what?" asked William. "Now we go up there and ask if Eleanor lives here," replied David, getting out of the car with determination. The others followed him to the gate. David rang the bell and they waited. Footsteps approached the door and a woman's voice asked, "Who is it?" "Good afternoon. We're looking for Mrs. Eleanor Marie Harrison Thompson." There was a pause before the answer. "That's me. What do you want?" Marcus felt his heart race. It was her. It really was her. David looked at his children and his brother, took a deep breath and said, "My name is David Thompson. I am your son." The silence that followed seemed to last an eternity. Then, slowly, they heard the sound of the lock being opened. The door opened, revealing a gray-haired lady with features Marcus recognized immediately from the old photographs. Eleanor was thinner and more wrinkled, but her eyes were still the same as in the pictures. She looked at David with an expression of pure shock, then at William and Patricia, and finally her eyes landed on Marcus. "My God," she whispered. "My children." David stepped forward, tears in his eyes. "Mom, we've been looking for you for so long." Eleanor covered her face with her hands and began to cry. For a moment no one moved, as if everyone was trying to process the reality of that moment. Finally, Eleanor opened her arms and David hugged her. Patricia and William joined the embrace, and Marcus stood watching, moved by the reunion his grandfather had dreamed of for decades. "Please come in," said Eleanor, drying her eyes. "We have so much to talk about." The living room was cozy, decorated simply but with great care. There were family photos on the shelf, but Marcus noticed there were no pictures of the children she had left behind. "How did you find me?" asked Eleanor, serving coffee for everyone. David looked at Marcus, indicating he should tell the story. Marcus explained about his grandfather's inheritance, the discovery in the hay house, and everything that had happened since. Eleanor listened in silence, her expressions varying between surprise, sadness, and what seemed like regret. "William built a house for me?" she asked, her voice choked. "He did, Grandma, and he wrote letters to you all these years, dozens of them. He never stopped thinking of me?" "Never," confirmed David. "From what we understood of his diary, you were the great love of Dad's life. He carried that pain alone for 40 years. Eleanor stood up and walked to the window, looking out at the garden as she tried to control her emotions. "I made a terrible mistake," she said finally. "I let pride speak louder than love." "Mom, what really happened?" asked Patricia. "Why did you leave?" Eleanor returned to sit near her children, and began to tell her version of the story. The fight had been over jealousy. William had found letters from an old boyfriend of Eleanor's, which were kept only as mementos, and had misinterpreted the situation. "Your father was always very insecure about my past," explained Eleanor. "He believed I still had feelings for that man, even after I explained the letters were just unimportant keepsakes. And why didn't you come back when you realized it was a misunderstanding? I tried to come back a few times, but your father had moved without telling me. I looked in the places we used to go, I asked acquaintances, but no one knew where he was living." Marcus remembered something he had read in his grandfather's diary. "Grandma, did you know about the place where you first met? A field where they held festivals." "Of course I knew. It was our special place. Why do you ask?" "Because that's exactly where he built the house. He hoped you would remember and go looking for him." Eleanor covered her face with her hands again. "I passed by that place hundreds of times over the years, but I never thought to stop and investigate. I thought he had completely forgotten about me." The conversation continued for hours, with each one sharing their experiences and feelings about the years of separation. Eleanor told them she had tried to rebuild her life in Raleigh, working as a teacher and trying to forget the past. "But I could never forget you," she admitted. "Not a single day went by that I didn't think of my children and wonder how they were growing up." "Why did you never marry again?" asked William. "How could I? My heart always belonged to your father. Even with all the pain and resentment, I knew William was the man of my life." David held his mother's hand. "Mom, Dad passed away last year. He never stopped loving you." Eleanor closed her eyes and took a deep breath. "I know. Somehow I felt he was gone. Sometimes I wake up in the middle of the night with the feeling that something has changed in the world, as if a part of me had left too." Marcus showed his grandmother some of the letters his grandfather had written. Eleanor read them with tears streaming down her face, discovering the love that had been declared for her all those years of silence. "He really waited for me," she murmured. "After all that happened, he truly believed I would return." "Grandma, there's something you need to know," said Marcus. "Grandpa left instructions in his will that, if you were found after his passing, you should receive a special message." Eleanor looked at Marcus with curiosity. "What message?" Marcus took from his pocket a sheet of paper he had found with the will, sealed and addressed, "To Eleanor, if she still exists. The notary gave this to me when I told him we were looking for you." With trembling hands, Eleanor opened the envelope and read the letter in silence. Her tears intensified as she read her husband's words. "What did he write?" asked David. Eleanor wiped her eyes and began to read aloud. "My dearest Eleanor, if you are reading this letter, it means our children have finally found you. It also means I have passed on without having the chance to ask for forgiveness in person for the stupid pride that separated us. I spent all these years regretting that fight, wishing I had run after you the next day to sort everything out. I built a house for us in the place where we met, hoping you would remember our love and come home. I wrote thousands of letters I never sent because I didn't know where to find you. If there is still a place in your heart to forgive me, know that you were and always will be the great love of my life. Take care of our children as I tried to care for them all these years. With eternal love, William." The silence that followed was broken only by the sound of Eleanor's sobs. David stood up and hugged her again, and Patricia and William joined the embrace. "We lost so much time," said Eleanor through tears. "So many years wasted because of pride." "But now we have found each other," replied David, "and we can make up for lost time." Marcus watched the scene with emotion but also with a hint of sadness. His grandfather had dreamed of this moment for decades, but had not lived to see it happen. "Grandma, would you like to visit the house Grandpa built?" he asked. Eleanor looked at Marcus with eyes still wet. "Very much. I would very much like to see what he created for us." The following Sunday, the whole family made the trip to the farmhouse. Eleanor had insisted on going despite her advanced age, and the emotion of the reunion still fresh. When they arrived at the location, Eleanor got out of the car and stood silently observing the building. Her hands trembled as she recognized the place where she had danced with William decades before. "It was right here," she murmured. "The 1958 Midsummer Festival. I was wearing that blue dress he liked so much." Marcus accompanied her to the entrance of the house. Eleanor entered slowly, touching the wooden walls as if she were touching her husband's hands. "He brought my things here," she said, recognizing personal items she had left behind. "My books, my perfume, even my wedding dress." David showed his mother the secret compartment where Marcus had found the letters. Eleanor knelt and touched the empty space, imagining how many times William had been there, writing to her. "May I stay here alone for a few moments?" she asked. The family left the house and left her alone with her memories. Through the window, they saw Eleanor walking through the house, touching every object, talking to herself as if she was speaking to William. When she came out, her eyes were red, but there was a serenity on her face that hadn't been there before. "I felt his presence," she said to Marcus. "It was as if he were there, showing me everything he built for us." In the following months, the family went through a process of adaptation and reconnection. Eleanor moved to a house near David's to be close to the children she had reunited with. She met her grandchildren and great-grandchildren, building new family bonds that filled the void of decades. Marcus became especially close to his grandmother, visiting her regularly and listening to her stories about her youth and marriage to William. Eleanor also took an interest in her grandson's studies and often helped him with history research for college. The Hay House was renovated and turned into a family gathering space. Marcus organized weekend work parties to restore the structure, and every family member contributed in some way. Eleanor supervised the work, ensuring the essence of the place was preserved. During the renovation, more surprises were discovered. Behind a wooden wall, they found a collection of items William had kept: movie tickets from films they watched together, dried flowers from bouquets he had given Eleanor, and even a vial with sand from the beach where they spent their honeymoon. "He kept everything," said Eleanor, moved, "every little memento of our love." Marcus realized that the discovery of the letters had changed not only the family, but also his own perspective on love and relationships. Seeing the pain the separation had caused his grandparents, he valued his own girlfriend and the time they spent together more. The Hay House became a symbol of the strength of true love. Neighbors from the area began visiting the place, drawn by the romantic story that had spread through the community. Eleanor often received young couples who wanted to see the House of Eternal Love. On one such visit, a young couple asked to celebrate their wedding at the location. Eleanor was moved by the request and organized a simple but touching ceremony in the same field where she and William had fallen in love. "Grandpa would be happy to know this place is bringing joy to other people," Marcus commented during the celebration. Eleanor smiled and looked at the starry sky. "I'm sure he's here with us somehow." The story of the discovery caught the attention of a local writer who asked permission to document the entire experience in a book. Eleanor initially hesitated, but then agreed, thinking that perhaps the story could inspire others to value love and family. During the interviews for the book, more details of the grandparents' lives came to light. Old friends of the couple came forward to share their memories, revealing aspects of William and Eleanor's personalities that the family didn't know. One such friend, Mr. George, an 85-year-old gentleman, said he had tried to convince William to look for Eleanor in the early years after the separation. "I told him, 'William, go after your woman. Pride doesn't keep anyone's bed warm.' But he was stubborn. He said if she wanted to come back, she'd know where to find him." Eleanor was surprised to learn that there were people who knew the truth about their separation and tried to help with reconciliation. "If I had known you were trying to reunite us, maybe everything would have been different," she said. Mr. George shook his head sadly. "The problem with you two is that you were the same, too proud to take the first step. But the love was so great, it withstood 40 years of separation." As the interviews continued, Marcus discovered that his grandfather had secretly tried to find Eleanor a few times. He had hired a private detective in the 90s, but the leads always led to dead ends. "Grandpa never told me about that," said David, surprised. "Your father was ashamed to admit he was looking," explained Mr. George. "He thought his children would think he was weak or that he was betraying the memory of your mother." Eleanor was moved to learn of William's efforts to find her. "He really did look for me," she murmured. "I always wondered if he missed me." The book about the grandparents' story was published at the end of the year and became a local success. The Hay House began to receive visitors from other cities, all curious to see the True Love Museum, as it had been nicknamed. Eleanor, despite her age, loved receiving visitors and personally telling the story of the love that withstood time. Every group that visited left, moved and inspired by the narrative. "It's amazing how a love story can touch so many people," Marcus commented to his grandmother during one of these visits. "True love always inspires my grandson. People recognize the truth when they see it." Marcus noticed that Eleanor was growing more fragile with each passing month, but she insisted on continuing to receive visitors and participating in family activities. There was a determination in her eyes, as if she were trying to recover all the lost time. During an intimate conversation, Eleanor confessed to Marcus that she knew her time was running out. "I'm not afraid, dear. I've lived a long life, and now I've had the chance to reunite with my family. If I leave tomorrow, I'll leave in peace." "Grandma, don't talk like that. You still have many years ahead." Eleanor smiled and stroked her grandson's face. "Marcus, you gave me the greatest gift I could receive, the chance to meet my adult children, and to know that William never stopped loving me. That is worth a whole lifetime." On a winter night, Marcus received an urgent call from David. Eleanor had fallen ill and was being taken to the hospital. When he arrived, he found the whole family gathered in the waiting room. "How is she?" he asked, worried. "The doctors say it was a mild stroke, but she's stable," replied Patricia. Marcus entered the room and saw Eleanor connected to some machines, but conscious and smiling weakly. "Hi, my little grandson," she said in a faint voice. "Hi, Grandma. How are you feeling?" "Tired but happy. I want you to promise me one thing." "Anything, Grandma." "Keep taking care of the Hay House. Don't let it be forgotten. It is proof that true love exists." Marcus held his grandmother's hand and promised he would always care for his grandparents' legacy. Eleanor recovered from that episode, but became more debilitated. She spent most of her time at home receiving family visits and reminiscing about the stories of her youth. On a spring afternoon, Marcus found her on the porch looking at the horizon with a serene expression. "What are you thinking about, Grandma?" "I'm thinking that life is funny. Sometimes we lose something very important due to pride or fear, but destiny always finds a way to fix things. Are you referring to the reunion with the family?" "I'm referring to everything, Marcus, to the love your grandfather and I shared, to the family we built, to the people we touched with our story. Nothing is ever truly lost, only transformed." That night, Eleanor passed away peacefully in her sleep, with a smile on her face. The family, though saddened, felt she had departed complete, having fulfilled her mission to reconnect with her loved ones. Dear listener, if you are enjoying the story, please take a moment to leave a like and especially subscribe to the channel. It helps us a lot as we are just starting out. Now continuing, Eleanor's funeral was held at the Hay House, honoring a request she had made in life. Hundreds of people attended, including all the couples who had been inspired by their grandparents' love story. Marcus gave a moving speech, talking about how the discovery of the letters had transformed his understanding of love and family. "My grandmother taught me that it's never too late to fix the mistakes of the past, never too late to forgive, and never too late to love," he said, his voice choked with emotion. After the funeral, the family decided to create a foundation in their grandparents' name, dedicated to helping struggling couples and promoting family reconciliation. The Hay House became the foundation's headquarters, offering free counseling and relationship workshops. Marcus took over the coordination of the foundation, using his engineering background to manage the expansion projects. Each year, more stories of reconciliation reached them, inspired by the example of grandparents William and Eleanor. In one such story, a 70-year-old man came to the foundation to share that he had reconciled with his brother after 20 years of conflict, inspired by the story he had read in the book about the grandparents. "If they could overcome 40 years of separation, I can overcome my pride too," the man said, moved. Marcus realized his grandparents' legacy was growing far beyond what anyone had imagined. The Hay House had become a symbol of hope for people across the country. During a routine visit to the house, Marcus discovered another secret compartment that had gone unnoticed during the renovation. Inside, he found one last surprise: a set of letters Eleanor had written to William during the years of separation but had never sent. The letters revealed that she too had spent decades thinking of him, writing of her longing and regrets. One of them, dated the same year William had passed away, was particularly touching. "My dearest William, today I felt something change in the world, as if a light had gone out. I can't explain it, but I have a feeling you have departed. If it's true, I want you to know I never stopped loving you, not for a second all these years. I built a new life, but my heart always belonged to you. I hope that, wherever you are now, you can forgive me." Marcus was moved to realize that, in some mysterious way, Eleanor had sensed her husband's passing even from afar. It was as if the love between them was so strong it transcended physical distance. He decided to include these letters in the museum being created at the Hay House, completing his grandparents' love story. Eleanor's letters were displayed alongside William's, showing that the love had been mutual and constant throughout the entire period of separation. The official museum opening attracted national attention. Journalists from various cities came to cover the story, and a documentary was produced about the discovery of the letters and their effects on the family. Marcus was interviewed by a national television network, where he told the whole story from the initial discovery in the abandoned house. "Did you ever imagine that a simple decision to accept your grandfather's inheritance would lead to all this?" asked the journalist. "Never," replied Marcus. "I just wanted to honor my grandfather's memory. I didn't imagine I would discover such a powerful love story and that it would touch so many people." "And what is the main lesson you take from this whole experience?" Marcus thought for a few moments before answering. "I learned that true love never dies, even when we face the greatest obstacles. And I learned that it's worth fighting for what we love, even when it seems impossible." After the documentary aired, the Hay House received international visitors. Couples from other countries traveled specifically to visit the place and be inspired by the story of Marcus's grandparents. A Japanese couple, who had separated 5 years earlier, visited the house and decided to attempt a reconciliation. They returned the following year to renew their wedding vows in the same place where William and Eleanor had fallen in love. "It's incredible to see how your grandparents' story continues to inspire people around the world," commented David during one of the family visits to the house. "Grandpa and Grandma never imagined their love would become so important to so many people," replied Marcus. The family established an annual tradition of gathering at the Hay House on the anniversary of the discovery of the letters. Each year, new members joined the group, grandchildren who had grown, new marriages, new babies. During one of these gatherings, Marcus announced he was engaged to his longtime girlfriend, Emily, and that they would like to marry at the Hay House. "I can't imagine a more fitting place to begin our life together," he said, moved. The wedding was held in the autumn, with the entire extended family and many of the friends who had been touched by the grandparents' story in attendance. During the ceremony, Marcus read excerpts from his grandfather's letters, promising his bride that their love would be as enduring as William and Eleanor's. Emily, who had known the story since the beginning of their courtship, was moved to hear vows inspired by her husband's grandparents' love. "I promise you that, even if we face storms, I will never give up on our love," she said during her vows. "Your grandparents' story taught me that true love is worth any sacrifice." After the wedding, Marcus and Emily moved into a house near the property, taking over full management of the museum and the foundation. They worked together every day, welcoming visitors and organizing events related to the grandparents' love story. One summer morning, Marcus found a letter in the foundation's mailbox. It was from a 60-year-old woman living in another state. "Dear Marcus, my name is Jennifer, and I want to thank you for sharing your grandparents' story. My husband and I were on the verge of divorce after 30 years of marriage when we watched the documentary about you. The story of William and Eleanor made us realize our problems were small compared to what they faced. We decided to fight for our marriage, and today we are happier than ever. We want to visit the Hay House next month to renew our vows in the place where it all began for them. Thank you so much for keeping this story of hope alive." Marcus showed the letter to Emily, and both were moved to realize the story's influence continued to grow. "Sometimes I wonder if the grandparents know about the impact their story is having," said Marcus. "I'm sure they do," replied Emily. "Their love is so strong it can still be felt by everyone who visits this place." While preparing to welcome Jennifer and her husband, Marcus decided to create a guest book where visitors could write their own stories of love and reconciliation. The book quickly filled with touching accounts from couples who had been inspired by the grandparents' story. One of the most remarkable stories was written by a 75-year-old widower. "I lost my wife 5 years ago and thought I would never be happy again. Learning the story of William and Eleanor made me realize that true love does not die with physical death. My wife is still with me in every memory and every happy moment we shared. Thank you for helping me find peace." Marcus realized the Hay House had become more than a museum or a foundation. It was a place of healing, of hope, and of renewed faith in human love. On a special afternoon, Marcus received a visit from a young reporter who was doing a story about the social impact of his grandparents' history. During the interview, the young man asked a question that made him reflect deeply. "Marcus, if you could speak to your grandpa now, what would you say to him?" Marcus looked toward the Hay House, pondering the question. "I would tell him he didn't just build a house, but a monument to eternal love. I would say his decision to wait for Eleanor, even without knowing if she would return, inspired thousands of people to never give up on love. And I would tell him that he and Grandma are together now forever, in the most beautiful place there is." As the years passed, Marcus and Emily had children who grew up playing in the fields around the Hay House and listening to the stories of their great-grandparents. The children often asked if they could see the ghosts of their great-grandparents, and Marcus always answered that they could feel their love in every corner of that special place. Marcus's eldest daughter, named Eleanor in honor of her great-grandmother, showed a special interest in the letters and family stories. By the age of 12, she already knew all the important dates and loved guiding visitors through the house, recounting details she had memorized. "Daddy, do you think I'll find a love like Great-Grandpa William and Great-Grandma Eleanor's?" she asked one day. "I'm sure you will, my daughter. But first you need to learn to love yourself and value the important people in your life. True love always comes to those who know how to recognize it." During an expansion renovation of the museum, Marcus discovered one more surprise hidden in the original structure of the house. Behind a main beam, he found a small envelope with his own name written in his grandfather's handwriting. Inside was a letter that William had written specifically for him, as if he knew Marcus would be the one to discover everything. "My dear grandson Marcus, if you are reading this letter, it means you have found our secrets and our story. I always knew you would be special, that you would have the sensitivity to understand the value of true love. I ask that you care for this house and this story, not just as memories of the past, but as seeds of hope for the future. Your grandmother's love and my love is eternal, and now it is in your hands to make sure it continues to inspire others. Be happy, my grandson. Live each day as if it were your last, but love as if it were forever. With all my affection, Grandpa William." Marcus cried as he read the letter, feeling as if his grandfather were there with him, guiding him and blessing the work he had done. He showed the letter to the whole family, and everyone was moved to realize that William had in some way planned for Marcus to discover the truth. "It's as if he knew you would be the right person to tell our story," commented David admiringly. The discovery of the personal letter generated even more interest in the family's story. More journalists came to do stories, and a second book was written, this time focusing on the social impact of the discovery and the transformation the story had caused in the local community. Marcus was invited to give lectures at universities about preserving family history and the importance of emotional bonds between generations. He always ended his presentations with the same message. Every family has its own hidden letters, its own untold love stories. It's worth searching for, it's worth preserving, and it's worth sharing. Love is the only inheritance that multiplies when it is divided. The impact of his grandparents' story reached international organizations working on family reconciliation. Marcus was invited to participate in a World Congress on the theme, where he presented the Foundation's experience and the methods they had developed to help families in conflict. During the conference, he met other activists and researchers working on similar themes around the world. He realized that the need for family reconnection was a global problem, and that his grandparents' story could serve as a model for initiatives in other countries. "You have discovered something very important," said a family psychologist from Norway. "The transformative power of true love stories transcends cultures and nationalities." Marcus returned from the conference inspired and with new ideas to expand the Foundation's work. He and Emily developed an online program that allowed people from anywhere in the world to share their own stories of family reconciliation and receive support from the community. The program went viral on social media, with thousands of people sharing accounts of how they had been inspired by the story of William and Eleanor to resolve family conflicts or reconnect with loved ones. One of the most touching stories came from a young woman who had reconciled with her father after 10 years of not speaking. "I read about William and Eleanor and realized that life is too short to hold grudges. I called my father and apologized for the fight we had. Today, we are best friends, and I can't imagine how I lived so long without him in my life." Marcus realized the Foundation's mission had evolved far beyond preserving his grandparents' memory. They were actively creating a global movement of reconciliation and family love. In an interview for an international magazine, Marcus was asked about his future plans for the Foundation. "We want to create a worldwide network of reconciliation houses inspired by our hayloft, places where families in conflict can come to talk, reflect, and find paths to peace. We believe my grandparents' model can be replicated in any culture." The Reconciliation Houses project gained support from social investors and non-governmental organizations. The first international house was built in Italy, following exactly the model of the original hayloft. Marcus and Emily traveled to Italy for the inauguration, bringing with them original letters from their grandparents to be displayed temporarily in the new space. The opening ceremony was attended by local authorities and representatives of European family organizations. "It is moving to see how my grandparents' love is taking root on other continents," said Marcus during his speech at the inauguration. During the trip, they visited other Italian cities and met families who had been inspired by the story. An elderly couple invited them to dinner and told them they had reconciled after 5 years of separation after watching the documentary about William and Eleanor. "Your story made us realize it is never too late to start over," said the lady in Italian, translated by an interpreter. Back in Brazil, Marcus found a surprise waiting at the Foundation. A group of university students had organized a research project on the social impact of love stories on resolving family conflicts, using his grandparents' story as the main case study. The research revealed impressive data. More than 60% of people who visited the hayloft reported significant improvements in their family relationships in the 6 months following their visit. The study was published in international academic journals, giving even more credibility to the Foundation's work. "The numbers prove what we have always felt. There is something special about this place and this story," Emily commented upon reading the research results. Marcus decided to use the research data to develop more effective family counseling methodologies. Working with psychologists and therapists, they created a care protocol based on the principles of unconditional love and forgiveness that William and Eleanor represented. The protocol was tested in several reconciliation homes around the world, always with positive results. Families arriving in conflict often left with renewed relationships and more hopeful perspectives for the future. In an annual Foundation review, Marcus realized they had directly helped over 10,000 families in the reconciliation process. Indirectly, through stories shared online and lectures, the impact had reached millions of people. Grandpa and Grandma never imagined their love would become such a powerful force for social transformation, reflected Marcus during a Foundation board meeting. The international success of the Foundation caught the attention of the United Nations, which invited Marcus to participate in a conference on family peace as a foundation for world peace. In his presentation, he argued that unresolved family conflicts often expanded into larger social conflicts. If we can teach people to resolve their family conflicts with love and understanding, we will be creating a solid foundation for a more peaceful society, said Marcus during his speech at the UN. The presentation was very well received, and Marcus was invited to join an international committee on family reconciliation. The work would lead him to travel the world, sharing the methodologies developed at the foundation and learning from other cultures about conflict resolution. Emily fully supported Marcus's decision to accept the invitation, even knowing it would mean more time away from home. "This is the calling you discovered through your grandparents," she said. "They would be proud to see how you are carrying their love to the entire world." During his international travels, Marcus always carried with him a photo of his grandparents and one of the original letters William had written to Eleanor. He told the story in different languages, always adapting it to local cultures but maintaining the universal essence of true love. In every country he visited, Marcus noticed that people connected emotionally with the story, regardless of their cultural or religious backgrounds. The love between William and Eleanor transcended all barriers. One of the most striking experiences was during a visit to a refugee camp in the Middle East. Marcus told the story to families who had been separated by war and saw tears in the eyes of people who had lost hope of reuniting with their loved ones. "Your story gives us strength to keep believing," said a woman through an interpreter. "If William waited 40 years for Eleanor, we can wait to reunite with our families." Marcus was deeply moved by the experience and decided to create a special foundation program for families separated by armed conflicts or natural disasters. The program offered emotional support and practical resources to help in the search for missing family members. The support program for separated families became one of the Foundation's most important initiatives. Using modern technology and an international network of volunteers, they managed to facilitate the reunion of hundreds of families around the world. Each successful reunion was celebrated at the Hay House through video conferences connecting the Brazilian family with the reunited families in other countries. It was as if the love of William and Eleanor was radiating hope to every corner of the planet. Marcus established a tradition of reading one of his grandparents' letters during each reunion celebration. William's words of eternal love always deeply touched the families, experiencing the joy of coming together again. "My grandparents' love proved that not even death can truly separate those who love each other," Marcus would say during these celebrations, "and you are proving that neither distance nor time can destroy true family bonds." On its 10th anniversary, the Foundation organized a major international event at the Hay House. Representatives from all the countries where the program had operated came to Brazil to celebrate and share their experiences. During the event, a monument honoring William and Eleanor was unveiled, created by a local artist and funded by donations from people who had been touched by their story. The monument depicted two figures holding hands, looking toward the horizon, symbolizing eternal love and hope. Marcus gave an emotional speech at the unveiling. "My grandparents built a small hay house as a symbol of their love. Today, that house has become a beacon of hope that illuminates families around the world. They could never have imagined that their love would become such a powerful force for good." During the celebrations, Marcus announced he was writing a new book, this time documenting all the stories of reconciliation that had been inspired by the discovery of his grandparents' letters. The book would include accounts of family reunions from every continent. "We want to show that William and Eleanor's story was not an isolated case," explained Marcus. "True love exists in every culture, in every family, waiting to be rediscovered and celebrated." The book was released simultaneously in 20 languages, becoming a worldwide publishing phenomenon. All proceeds were donated to expand the Foundation's work, allowing for the creation of more reconciliation houses in developing countries. Marcus realized he had dedicated over 15 years of his life to the mission inspired by his grandparents, and that it had become not only his calling, but the calling of his entire family. Emily had become a recognized expert in family therapy, and their children were growing up understanding the importance of humanitarian work. Their eldest daughter, Eleanor, at 17, was already showing interest in following in her parents' footsteps. She had created a youth program inspired by her great-grandparents' story, helping teenagers resolve family conflicts and improve communication with their parents. "Dad, I want to study psychology and work at the Foundation," Eleanor said one day. "I feel this is my destiny too." Marcus was moved to see his grandparents' legacy being passed to a new generation. The love story that had begun decades ago would continue to impact the world through their descendants. During a routine visit to the Hay House, Marcus sat in the same chair where his grandfather used to write letters to Eleanor. Looking at the surrounding fields, he reflected on the entire journey that had begun with a simple decision to accept a seemingly worthless inheritance. "Grandpa, Grandma," he murmured, looking at the sky. "I hope you are proud of what we have done with your love. We have turned a story of separation into thousands of stories of reconciliation." At that moment, Marcus felt a gentle breeze touch his face, and for an instant he had the feeling his grandparents were there with him, blessing all the work that had been done in the name of their eternal love. End of story. So what did you think of this moving story of eternal love? Let us know in the comments which part touched your heart the most, and if you have ever experienced a family reconciliation. Your participation is very important to us. Don't forget to leave your like and subscribe to the channel so you don't miss other inspiring stories like this one. Thank you so much for your company.